Hello and welcome to Season 4 of the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. For the past few years, host Jorden Guth has been learning about the who, the what, and the when of hi-fi from the pioneers who made our hobby what it is today, as well as the modern innovators who are constantly striving to push performance to new levels. That's not going to change, but this year he'll also be learning about the other two W's, where your favorite gear is made these days, and why. So with that out of the way, let's see who Jorden is chatting with this time around.
Hello and welcome to the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. Today we're doing another on-location episode in Rotterdam, Netherlands with Martijn Mensink, one of the co-founders of Dutch & Dutch. Welcome.
Thank you, Jorden.
So for those of you who haven't heard the previous episode that we did with Martijn about Dutch & Dutch, we're going to leave it in the show notes and you can kind of revisit that to learn more about kind of the overarching idea of the company and their headline product, the 8C. Today, after just kind of finishing up our second day of filming here, I had a bunch of questions about how kind of a speaker company nowadays, or relatively new, gets off the ground and what considerations you have in terms of what you do in-house versus what you outsource, and where that kind of leads you in terms of a company and how that allows you to kind of grow. So, and I'll preface this by saying we've had a little bit of this conversation, and Martijn, you are not necessarily the person in charge of the manufacturing.
No, that's right. I'm not in charge of the manufacturer. I'm mostly focusing on the outside of the company. So I do P&R, some marketing, sales, and I'm responsible for the design and concepts of our products.
So a lot of the research and development and kind of what goes into the speakers, the concepts of what to bring to market to begin with.
That's right.
So maybe we'll kind of start with how Dutch & Dutch originally kind of got off the ground. And I guess bring us back. This was around 2015, somewhere around there?
Yeah, Dutch & Dutch was founded in 2014, in the summer of 2014. And the first few years, we did actually not make a speaker like the 8C. We were not active in the hi-fi market. We were not active in the studio market, the two markets that we're active in today. Our aim in the beginning was to make a pro audio product, which we did. We made a small series of products in the early few years. And these were also what we call constant directivity loudspeakers. So with the cardioid technology that we employ today, it was a cardioid monitor, like with a compression driver on a waveguide, with a cardioid mid-range driver, and a separate cardioid subwoofer, an active subwoofer, with a big 18-inch woofer in the front and a 15-inch woofer in the back. And we thought that this technology would be very beneficial in live sound environments because you could aim the sound directly where you wanted to go, and not basically similarly to what we're doing with the 8Cs right now and our other products that are in development, not basically radiating as much sound energy to the walls and the floors and the ceilings, etc. So you just want the sound to end up where your audience is in the pro audio environment. And the tricky thing for us at the time is the products themselves, they were quite good. We achieved the aims that we had set for them. However, it's very hard for a small, young company to break into the pro audio world. And the reason for that is that you might come up with a great innovation, you might make a great product, but that's not enough. For instance, the rental companies, what they want is a complete lineup of products. They don't want just one solution for one particular problem. They want to source all their loudspeakers, for instance, from one supplier. And that means you need a lot of funding and to set that all up, which we didn't have at the time. Therefore, we made these small series of products and we managed to sell a couple. But ultimately, this was not a path that was feasible for us. So we had to, you could say, pivot into a different direction. And for us, that was with the 8C, we aimed to target both the hi-fi market and the studio market.
And I guess when we're talking about the development of a new product, like when you were developing the 8C, how did you even go about this? And this might have also been a conversation in the pro market. It's like, well, you could have potentially taken your ideas and used the little bit of resources that you had to get your ideas manufactured, let's say overseas. you could have gone that route, but instead you kind of pivoted to an entire new audience in kind of hi-fi and I'm going to say like the production studio environment. And with the 8C, you decided to bring a lot of the manufacturing, assembly, and technology in-house. So how did you guys come up with that approach? Like, why not just like white label your technology onto a cabinet manufacturer from China and pull out, I don't know, DSP or whatever, and just add your little flavor on it and just have that imported from India or wherever it may be?
We realized that our technology, basically in the initial phases centering around the cardio technology, that it offered clear benefits in certain situations. And the people who would appreciate those benefits would be people who are willing to spend some money on that. And they are people like the clientele that we have right now who appreciate the benefits of our range of technologies that we implement in the AC, like the very high quality tweeter in a waveguide, the cardio mid-range, and the battery coupled bass. And what we wanted to do is make sure that the product that we made was truly high-end. So the people who appreciate those benefits that I just mentioned, they are people who want to get the best sound, like objectively the best sound. And that meant that we wanted to give it to them. And for those reasons, in order to make a truly great speaker, you basically have to do a lot of things in-house. Not everything. So we do not make, for instance, our own transducers. We work together with very high-quality OEM manufacturers who make the transducers for us. And,
was there any thought originally of saying like, oh, these guys do kind of a DSP that I like. Why don't we just kind of license it from them, maybe add our own little flavor? We only hire one developer, let's say, and then we just kind of switch up an app or whatever and get off the shelf stuff. Was that ever on the cards, or was there always this idea like, no, we need to do this from scratch, ground up?
No, it wasn't the cards. We did seriously consider using basically off-the-shelf DSPs. We did some testing with off-the-shelf DSPs, but ultimately we did not have the freedom that we needed in order to achieve the goals that we had. And for that reason, we decided to make it ourselves. And from the beginning, we had a guy on our team who is he's a brilliant guy, and he does all the DSP work. And
to this day,
yeah, absolutely. And so pretty early on, we decided, yes, we will design our own platform. And we realized early on also that it would take a lot of time. It would cost a lot of resources, time, money, but that it would be important in the long run because we wanted to do all kinds of fancy stuff that would be very relevant to our customers in the situations where they use our products. Things like what we call the room matching, room equalization, and other sorts of room adaptation. And for that reason, we need total control of the DSP platform. And it's taken a couple of years. So in the beginning, our software was quite rudimentary, but right now it's becoming more and more advanced, and it allows us to do things that very few other companies can do.
If we're talking about development of speakers, I don't know necessarily how long all speakers take to kind of get from concept into prototype into production kind of lines. From Dutch and Dutch, what does that process look like? Like, I can't imagine that you guys have been sitting on your heels for the last few years. So when we're talking about kind of the building blocks to actually getting an end product, maybe let's talk about the AC here. Like, what was the timeline like to kind of get that product ready to go? Are we talking months? Are we talking years? Like,
I think from the moment that it was actually launched into the market, it was probably about 2 years. We were relatively fast given all the technologies that we had to develop.
How long did it take for the development of the 8C from like concept into final?
Right. So I think all in all, from the moment that we started working on it until we sold the first products, it was probably around 2 years. And looking back, it's actually pretty quick, I'd say, given all the technologies that we had to develop. So given that we designed the speaker. We designed our own electronics, and we also had to design a lot of our software. And the funny thing about the AC is it was launched about 7.5 years ago. And for most products, when they're launched to the market, the R&D is mostly done. But with the AC, we've continued to work on the software. So we've been working on the same platform for years, expanding it, and it's become better and offering more benefits to users. And the same platform we will be using across all our products in the near and distant future.
You're not the end manufacturing guy. You don't necessarily put the physical product through the paces to get from like a sheet of wood into an actual speaker. But tell me a little bit about your side of that process. So you come up with a concept, you come up with ideas. How does that work? Where does that go from there?
So I mostly work together quite closely with my co-founder, Eric, who's one of our co-founders. He's an industrial engineer, and how it basically works, I come up with an idea for a concept. I communicate that with him, and he puts it in CAD. So he uses mostly SolidWorks. He puts it in CAD and he shows me, and we go through it, and he asks me, is this what you mean? I'll provide him with some feedback, and he makes some changes. And then we usually have it prototyped. And in the early days, I'm talking about, say, about 10 years ago. In the early days, it would usually take quite a bit of time, and we do some of the prototyping ourselves. But these days, we mostly outsource the prototyping. So we have cabinets made by our main suppliers who make the cabinets for our current products. We also work with companies in our area who do fast prototyping, so CNC routing and a lot of 3D printing. So 3D printing has become way more accessible than it was even a couple of years ago. And so it's a lot of back and forth between Eric and me. And yeah, that's basically how we gradually come to a functional prototype and take it from there.
And when does the software element kind of start coming into effect? Because all of the speakers that you've manufactured to this date are active, and I can't imagine, just based on kind of how you position yourself in the company, that you'd be looking at passive speakers. So the software must be a very fundamental point of the development of the speakers.
That's right. Yeah. So our speakers are active, and I reckon that in the foreseeable future, they will remain active. And the main reason is simply performance. We're a very performance-oriented company, and active speakers simply are better. Software is an integral part of the design. The funny thing, though, is that it starts with an acoustic concept. So I come up with an acoustic concept, then we start prototyping it. And when I want to make that prototype play sound, I usually just use the electronics from the HC. I can program the filters. We have a programming interface that allows me to easily program the DSP filters.
So when does the software element come into play in terms of your acoustical designs and your R&D? Because Dutch & Dutch is very heavily focused on active speakers that use a lot of this technology to overcome some of the compromises in, let's say, transducers and other fundamental things. So when does the DSP and the other electronics come into play?
So in the case of the HC, we started working on the DSP platform and the software and the electronics at more or less the same time as I started working on the concept of the HC, the acoustic concept. So things were kind of hand in hand. However, some of the low-level software, the embedded kind of software, they could only start with that when the electronics were basically done. Because you need the electronics in order to figure out how to write the software for that. The user interface and stuff like that were also designed after that. But right now it's a bit different because we already have a working platform on the HC. So with the electronics and the software that runs on the HC, but also our software that runs in the cloud, the app, etc. So right now we are working on new products on updated electronics, but that same electronics platform with a DSP and inputs and a computer that's on the same electronics board can be used for multiple products. So we are right now working on a new app update of the software that runs in the cloud. And that's basically happening all at the same time. And in the not too distant future, we will release new products. But pretty soon after, relatively speaking, we will be able to release other products that will all use the same technology. So we call it Ascend, and it's a technology platform that will be used across our products.
This is really exciting, and I know we don't want to get too far into the realm of the new products and all that stuff. So we'll kind of not ask questions that could be compromising that way. But when we're thinking about how Dutch and Dutch started, a lot of the fundamental things in terms of doing stuff in-house, it seems like that is what's laid the groundwork for you to now be able to say, this is the evolution of that. And from here, all of our products will be able to use the same fundamental technologies, approaches, and all of that. So a little bit slower to start, but then the runway is quite longer in terms of what's possible.
That's right. Because in a sense, the electronics that we're working on right now and the new software, it's basically been in development for 10 years now because we keep expanding the same platform. It's not like we have to start over again. So most other DSP-based loudspeakers, I think I said it earlier, usually the R&D stops when the product is launched, but we continue building on the same platform. So it keeps getting better over time. And this is something that our customers appreciate a lot. So somebody who purchased their HCs back in, say, 2018, in the beginning, it didn't have a lot of features. You could set them up in the room with the boundaries, and with a lot of hassle, you could program some EQ filters and stuff like that. And a lot of that right now is way easier with the new app, and things are automated. And we'll continue to make things easier for people. And for instance, the HC in the beginning didn't have streaming. Now it does.
And what does that investment look like for the software side of things? Does that mean that you're continuously hiring new developers and kind of going even further down the kind of in-house route?
We actually, the development team is still the same as when we started. So we're very fortunate with that. We have some very good guys working on the Ascend platform. And it's the same guys who keep making it better and better and better.
So the tenure of the employees is actually quite long.
Yes.
And when we're talking about manufacturing the actual products themselves, so you do rely on other manufacturers for the transducers. What are some of the challenges in that? Like, are you beholden to what is currently in the market? Like, would you ever put yourself in a position where you could make your own transducers to give yourself other specific advantages or kind of compromises that work in advantage to your speakers? Or is the idea that you're essentially going to continue allowing other people to do the fun work of making transducers, and then you can adjust that through the DSP and through the electronics and all that side?
There are a lot of transducer manufacturers out there, and a lot of them make very high quality drivers. We could, in theory, design our own drivers, and maybe we will at some point, but only if there's a need for it. Right now, we have some very good partners around us that make very high quality drivers, and they can basically change off-the-shelf drivers for us. So we get OEM versions of that. We can change the cone, we can change maybe some parts of the motor, whatever, if we need that. So at this point, I don't see any need, simply because specialists make great drivers already. It's not a certainty that we will not at some point in the future make our own drivers. But like I said, there has to be a need for that. And there are some situations where that might be the case. But it's too early now to go into that, although I have some ideas.
And I guess when it comes to other areas of the manufacturing, is there any areas of manufacturing that you kind of started down a path where you're saying, we're going to do this in-house, and then you changed and said, you know what, this is actually an area that it doesn't make sense for us to do this in-house?
No, I think it's mostly been the other way around early on. So with the HC early on, we wanted to have an assembly partner do the assembly for us. But that didn't work quite the way we wanted. So right now what we do is we have all the parts made for us to our specification. And then we do the final assembly, we do the QC, and then we ship the product. So that's what we do right now. We don't actually manufacture parts ourselves. So other specialist companies make the enclosures, for instance, to our specification. But the assembly has been very important for us to do it ourselves, because we'll have to assure that the quality is there.
And when you were having somebody else do the assembly, and presumably you were doing the final kind of QC, what were some of the issues that you were finding?
Well, basically in the beginning, it was just, you have to learn how to put everything together. So that means we had to make manuals in the early beginning of how to do it, but then you stumble upon issues in putting it all together. And what these assembly partners want to do is they want you to give them a manual and follow that exactly step by step. And at the time, there was not a lot of learning happening at the manufacturing company or the assembly company. So I'm not going to say that it's impossible to work that way, but I think in the beginning you have to do it yourself until you have all the kinks. How do you say this in English?
Yeah, all the kinks worked out.
Yeah, until you have all the kinks worked out. The HC, we do all the final assembly here, but we have gradually moved in the direction of having more of the labor done by our suppliers. For instance, what we did here is we put all the electronics in the beginning. We completely assembled our electronics panels. We put the amps on there and the electronics board, et cetera, but more of that is now done by our manufacturers. So we ship parts to the manufacturer and they already do assembly there, and they just add some steps that we would otherwise do here to their assembly procedure, basically. So we are gradually moving away from doing all the assembly work here, but we will still do the final assembly.
And the final QC.
Absolutely.
And kind of that element. And what are some of the learnings over the years that you wouldn't have expected, but you kind of found out that, I don't know, anything interesting from the way that things are packaged to ship to considerations around those final products getting to the customer? Product
weight is an issue in shipping. So the heavier a product, the more likely it is to get damaged in transit. That's one thing. We've had some damages of Dutch and Dutch HCs in the past when they were shipped as parcels, mostly. So these days we ship them on a small pallet, which is way more expensive and inconvenient for customers if you ship directly to receive a small pallet, but it's safer. So that's something that was an interesting thing to learn.
A technology, and we were kind of going over this in terms of headphones, a new technology that's kind of, or I shouldn't say new, but Dolby Atmos kind of making its way out and all that stuff. Would technologies like Dolby Atmos ever make their way into products like the 8C and get set up in that way? Or is there other technologies that you're looking at down the road and you're like, well, that might be worth investigating and researching?
I think Dolby Atmos is a very interesting technology. And actually, there are more than a few studios that I know that use 8Cs in the studio. There's even one where there are 11 8Cs in a Dolby Atmos system.
Oh, wow.
And it sounds incredible. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so they're already being used for that type of technology?
Absolutely. They're already being used, yes.
So there's nothing
Actually, there's the 8C has some great benefits. So the tricky thing with the Dolby Atmos system is that you put speakers everywhere around the room, and usually the conventional speakers, they interact with a room in tricky ways sometimes, particularly if you put them close to the boundaries, so close to the side walls and close to the ceiling. So speakers are attached to the ceiling, and if they're very close, you usually get a reflection and coloration. And the 8C is made basically to be positioned very close to the wall behind it. So you can easily put them on the ceiling without any detrimental effects, no reflections, stuff like that. So they're actually a very good product to use in a wide range of studios.
And does that translate into like the average, let's say, consumer home? Could you potentially set like an array of 8Cs up in a home environment to kind of achieve the same results, or is that more specialized for the studio equipment and that technology? You
could do it in a home environment, but I think there are a few people who'd be willing to put 11 speakers in their music room or even in a home theater. So it's you could, and if you wanted to, the 8C is a great speaker for that. But it's a lot of speakers in one room.
There's quite a bit there. So there's this idea of like national pride in assembling something in country, right? So when you look at Dutch and Dutch speakers made in the Netherlands.
Yeah, sure. I'm very glad that we can do it here. I think it would be less fun to have products made entirely to our spec somewhere else. We do take pride in making the products here ourselves. I mean, it's Dutch and Dutch. We're a Dutch company, and the products are conceived of here in the Netherlands and they're made here in the Netherlands. And sure, there's some pride in that.
It's quite literally in the name, so it'd be a little bit strange otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Where do you see the kind of speaker industry going, like hi-fi in general? Do you see, and especially in this economic climate where we have some changing tides in terms of policies and all that stuff, do you think a lot more countries are going to be manufacturing in country, or do you think that it's just not possible to kind of achieve some of these results doing it all in-house?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a trend of less globalization. We're becoming a more multipolar world, and I think it makes sense to have products, at least the parts, made locally as much as possible. There's less risk involved, and I think we're moving in the direction, yes.
When it comes to your day-to-day now, in terms of kind of the work you do in the research and development, do you have kind of like a typical day at Dutch and Dutch? Are you spending a lot more of your time doing R&D these days, or is it kind of gearing up to something new on the horizon, or is it kind of still explaining the benefits of what is currently offered?
As one of the founders, I wear several hats, you could say. So I am indeed a loudspeaker designer, and I spend quite a bit of time on that lately because we are working on new products. Besides that, I'm also involved with some of the app design right now. We're working on an update of our Ascend app. I also communicate with people like yourself, with the press, and with customers. I do some sales work, and I'm involved with marketing. For instance, I'm going to go to Expona real soon. So it's a lot of different things, a lot of fun things. Yeah.
Where do kind of concepts for new ideas and new speakers come about? Like you were saying kind of earlier when it came to the 8C, like you had all these ideas and you started kind of doing effectively napkin drawings. And then from there, you worked with Eric to kind of get them made into prototypes and so on. How do you kind of come up with new ideas? Like, are you just sitting around one day and something pops into your head, or is it more of a process that is replicated that you can say, all right, well, this is an area that we should focus on? How does that even come up?
It is a process. So there have been several prototypes that have not made it to production. So it is a process. And with every prototype, you learn something, with every concept, and you refine it, basically. So there are certain lessons that I've learned long ago now about what makes a good speaker. And those principles will always be followed, but there's some room for playing around.
Is there things that you kind of find that you just can't quite achieve, even though the idea is there? It just isn't possible just yet to have that manufactured to that way, or there's trade-offs that you have to kind of agree to because of the manufacturing elements?
No, I don't think so. There's a lot of things we can accomplish these days. And not really. I mean, modern production technologies allow you to make very sophisticated hardware these days. We have a very powerful DSP that helps us in achieving lots of different things. So no.
To kind of close things off, originally you kind of gave me some different songs that you were listening to. What are you listening to these days?
The last few weeks I've been listening to a lot of The Weeknd. He's got a new album. I don't remember the title, but it's like he's got like a triptych of 3 albums. So I've been listening to those, the last 3 albums. They're quite nice.
That's about it?
That's about it.
Awesome. I'll throw it onto my playlist and we'll give it a listen on the plane ride home. Martijn, thank you so much for taking the time, showing off the Dutch & Dutch facility and all the cool stuff that you do.
Thank you.
All the best.